Every winter, the same pattern repeats itself. Windows close, heat comes on, the air goes stale, and colds spread through households that barely interacted the rest of the year. What most people never learn is that this is not primarily a problem of cold temperatures or weak immunity. It is an air problem. Long before antibiotics, lozenges, or humidifiers, people followed a simple winter air rule that dramatically reduced respiratory illness, even in crowded homes, barracks, ships, and farmhouses. This knowledge was once common sense. Today, it is almost entirely forgotten. This guide is not theory, lifestyle advice, or modern wellness talk. It is a practical, historically grounded system of air control that was used deliberately and repeatedly by past generations to limit winter sickness. If you understand it and apply it, you can materially reduce how often colds circulate in your home without taking a single pill. Back in the day, winter illness was managed through air, not medicine. Before the middle of the 20th century, folks didn't really think of colds as something you just caught out of the blue. Instead, they believed colds spread under certain indoor conditions. Medical manuals from the 1800s and early 1900s, they kept warning that stagnant winter air was actually more dangerous than cold outdoor air. Hospitals, tuberculosis sanatoriums, schools, and even prisons all operated on this idea. Fresh air wasn't just about comfort, it was a real control measure. Rooms were deliberately aired out every day in winter. Bedrooms were ventilated even in freezing temperatures. Sick rooms were kept cooler than the rest of the house. The goal was not warmth, the goal was air exchange. The rule was simple. No room should smell, used, feel heavy, or remain sealed for long periods. This worked because respiratory viruses thrive in still, dry, recycled air. What people lacked in virology, they made up for with observation and brutal experience. The core principle was not to kill germs, but to dilute them. People did not believe they could make indoor air sterile, and they were right. Instead, they focused on constant replacement. So, this is why older buildings were drafty by design. Transom windows above doors, vents near ceilings, fireplaces that pulled air upward, and, even leaky construction. All of these actually served a purpose. They made sure that no one was breathing the same air for too long. You can apply this principle today without turning your home into an icebox. The rule isn't keep windows open all day. The rule is never allow air to become trapped. Short, controlled ventilation cycles, they really do achieve the same effect. Back in the day, cold air was actually considered healthier than warm, stale air. One of the most misunderstood historical practices is winter ventilation in sleeping rooms. People, believe it or not, slept in cold rooms on purpose. Now, it wasn't because they enjoyed being uncomfortable, but because, the outcomes of illnesses were actually better. If we look at military records, orphanage reports, and hospital data from the late 1800s, there's something quite interesting. They show lower rates of respiratory infection in colder, well-ventilated sleeping quarters than in warm, sealed ones. Cold air holds less moisture, which limits bacterial growth, but more importantly, it keeps people from exhaling moisture back into the same trapped space all night. 8 hours of breathing in a sealed bedroom turns air into a concentrated soup of whatever everyone brought in with them. A practical modern application is simple. Crack a window slightly in bedrooms at night, even in winter, while using adequate bedding instead of overheating the room. The body warms itself easily. Air does not clean itself at all. Folks often get the wrong idea about how people used to handle winter air in the old days, thinking it was all about fancy humidity gadgets. But honestly, humidity was actually managed indirectly, mostly by controlling air movement and moderating the heat. When rooms get overheated, the air dries out real fast. And that dry air, well, it can really irritate your nasal passages, weaken your mucosal defenses, and make you more likely to catch something. Back then, homes were usually kept a lot cooler, probably cooler than most of us would find comfortable today. Instead of cranking up the fire, folks would bank it, keeping it going but not blazing. Stoves were set to a steady, gentle output, not blasting heat all over the place. This whole approach helped keep the air from getting too dry, and that in turn reduced irritation in the airways and lungs. A practical application today is lowering indoor temperatures slightly and ventilating briefly rather than overheating and sealing the house. Even just 5 minutes of cross-ventilation 2 or 3 times a day, it dramatically improves air quality without significant heat loss. When someone fell ill in winter, the first intervention was not medicine. It was isolation combined with ventilation. Sick rooms were placed near windows. Curtains were pulled back. Fresh air was allowed to circulate continuously. Visitors were limited not because of contact alone, but because of air contamination. Caregivers were instructed to avoid lingering unnecessarily. Bedding was aired and clothing was hung near open windows. These practices reduced transmission within households long before germ theory was fully accepted. These days, most folks actually do the opposite of what used to be recommended. They tend to close up the windows to keep the sick person warm and seal off the room. But, doing that just traps pathogens and actually increases exposure for everyone who comes in. If we go back to the old rule, it really means putting airflow first, even if it's a little less comfortable, while making up for it with blankets and proper clothing. Our respiratory system, well, it evolved out in the open, so cold moving air isn't really the enemy here. Dry, stagnant indoor air is something we often overlook, but it can really affect our health in ways we might not expect. Our nasal passages, well, they actually rely on moisture and gentle airflow to filter out pathogens. When the air is dry and still, those natural defenses just weaken, making us more vulnerable, honestly. Historical practitioners, they sort of understood this intuitively. They noticed that folks who worked outdoors all winter often stayed healthier than those who were stuck indoors. And, they also saw that illness tended to spike after long stretches with closed windows and heavy heating. The winter air rule, you see, emerged from pattern recognition, not ideology. It's kind of fascinating how these things develop, isn't it? Applying this today means, rethinking our indoor winter habits. It's a bit of a shift, but try opening windows briefly, even on those cold days. And, don't forget to ventilate kitchens and bathrooms aggressively. It makes a world of difference. And here's another important tip. Avoid sleeping in sealed rooms. It's just not the best idea, So, it's a good idea to dress for cooler indoor temperatures instead of just overheating your spaces. Now, you sure don't need to live in a drafty old farmhouse to make this work. What you really need is discipline and consistency. Go ahead and air out the home in the morning and evening by opening windows on opposite sides for just a few minutes. It's a good idea to keep the bedroom air moving at night. Try cracking a window open or using a ventilation fan. It really helps. Oh, and here's a tip for you. Avoid keeping doors and windows sealed for entire days. Let that fresh air in. If someone in the household starts feeling a cold coming on, it's better to increase the ventilation instead of reducing it. Trust me, it makes a difference. Let fresh air dilute what is being exhaled. Use warmth strategically on the body, not the room. This is exactly how people managed winter illness before pharmaceuticals existed. As central heating improved and medicine advanced, folks started to treat colds as just plain unavoidable, and, well, air is kinda irrelevant. Buildings became airtight, and comfort ended up replacing circulation. The winter air rule faded not because it stopped working, but honestly just because it became inconvenient. Yet, the evidence is still there, embedded in architecture, historical records, and those institutional practices that worked for decades. We did not outgrow this knowledge, we abandoned it. This is not nostalgia, this is practical history. The winter air rule reduced illness when people had fewer resources, less medical intervention, and harsher conditions. It still works because, well, human biology has not changed. If you value historical knowledge that translates into real-world resilience, this is honestly one of the simplest and most powerful practices you can reclaim. No supplements, no devices, just air used correctly. If you found this valuable, go ahead and subscribe to Wisdom for the Journey and share this with someone who still thinks winter sickness is inevitable. Preserving useful knowledge only matters if it's passed on.